good evening, everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Thomas McLennigan. I'm the Education and Outreach Manager over at the Museum of the Aleutians, and welcome to an evening on whales, a pair of whale talks with Ed Lyman and then Dr. Suzie Teerlink. This is kind of a joint effort by the Museum of the Aleutians and NOAA. And if you are unaware, we will be streaming the talks tonight. That is why there's a camera in the back. So everything will be recorded, and then after the talk, I am going to pull it down, we'll do a little bit of editing, and I'm going to put it back onto YouTube on the Museum of the Aleutians YouTube page. So if you'd like to go back and revisit the talk at some point, that's where you can do it. That being said, we do like to begin every Museum of the Aleutians program just by acknowledging that the Museum of the Aleutians and all of our programming is located on the ancestral and unceded traditional territories of the Unalaska, and that this program and many of our other programs are brought to you through the support of the citizens of the City of Unalaska. So with that said, I will turn it over to Ed, and we'll hop on in.
Thank you, Thomas. Great introduction. Cool. Okay, well, I'm going to switch from suction cup tags to catch and release. We had a catchy title there. And by the way, that catch and release can be interpreted two ways. We're going to talk about entanglement and the threat and the response to it. But one side of that catch is the entanglement itself. It happened. Whether it's fishing gear or not, the bycatch if it's fishing gear, and otherwise just an entanglement. We'll talk about that part. But we also want to talk about the response side, and many times, not in all cases, especially we've seen this in this area off of Unalaska, the entangled whale is not always a mobile whale, but in many cases they are mobile, so to cut them free, we have to catch them, slow them down at least, to gain access to get the gear off. And we have little tricks there. Some of those, and I can take this down the rabbit hole a little further, some of these analogies, and that is, it is fishing, and we're using modified fishing techniques that have historically been used to actually get the gear off the whales, changing things around a little bit. So we'll talk about that a little bit, give you a quick overview. That's the goal this evening. And if you have any questions, maybe towards the end we'll do questions, because we want to make sure, save enough time for both of us, as well as not keep you guys too late. So first, we wanted to start with just a closer look at the actual entanglement and the threats, the risks posed to the animals. Just a quick background here. Okay? And it's a global threat. Many species involved. Okay? We're going to be focused on large whales this evening in that regard. A great variety of gear, and not all of it being fishing gear. That's one thing everyone thinks it's always fishing gear. And that's one thing we want to know. If it is fishing gear, we'll mark it as such. If it's not, we want to find out what it is. Part of the solution here is mitigation and a very broad-based threat. I want to mention that early on as well. So, but again, we're going to focus on the large whales. The primary one, whether it's throughout the North Pacific or even locally, more regionally here, is going to be the humpback whale. So I chose this image wisely because it kind of gave you a better sense. Yes, I took a Hawaii entanglement to give you a better view in this case. But mouth entanglement of this whale here, it's over 85%. The values are changing slightly, but for the North Pacific that we know of, it's over 85% of the large whale entanglements end up being humpback whales. So there's a bunch of reasons for that. I shouldn't go into all of them. One is the profile of the whale. You have that 15-foot long pectoral flippers there, very coastal whale, a lot of tendency overlap. And on the side, we were talking about this earlier, effort-wise, this is the whale people like to see, so you're going to have more whale watching, and people are going to stop and look at this and go, oh, look, it's entangled. That kind of thing happens. You see the links there. Generally, as an adult, 35 to 45 feet long. Female is going to be larger, by the way. And around 30 to 40 tons. Yeah, maybe getting up to 45 more these days. And they're a baleen whale. They are one of the baleen whales, or mysticetes, the mustache whales. Okay, so on the thread itself, I did put kind of a broad definition here, because entanglement itself is wraps, drapes around the body of the animal. Okay, it is that. But it usually encompasses also hookings, entrapments, and ingestion to a certain degree, down in the mouth or to the esophagus. Beyond that, it's different. It falls into a totally ingested in that regard. So it is considered one of the largest human caused or anthropogenic threats out there for the large whales. The other big one tends to be ship strikes. Okay, those are the ones. They're also very visible in some ways as well. Just noting some of the biases again, our challenges in interpreting and measuring, quantifying these threats. Okay. The impacts are at the individual level as well as the population level. some examples there. Okay. But I also wanted to mention there's the broader impacts. This is, a lot of times, at least in my, I'll admit this, early on, my focus was on the whale side of things. And I've come to realize that those impacts are broader. It can be cultural, it can be the socioeconomic, it can be like fishing industry, for instance. When I worked with them, I could tell they didn't want to catch a whale. There was a cost there. It was everything from, I just lost my gear, I lost money, there might be more regulations coming that might limit me, things of that nature. Okay, so there's a broad-based threat out there. Impact on these threats on the whale side, we come back to the whale side now, typically not immediate, so they, a lot of times, not all cases, we know that, especially locally, they will rip the gear off the ocean floor, at least part of it, and swim off with it, 45-foot whale. And I chose this whale wisely because this whale took the gear from Unalaska Pass and swam down to Maui. Okay, it took about 5.5, 6 weeks, a little longer than average, I would say, but brought the gear all the way down to Maui. Someone found the whale, reported it. We were able to get the gear off. This is back in 2006, by the way. So, but it's another case of, kind of, this is the second whale we know of for Maui that has come from Oceanic Pass, okay? Now, it wasn't the whole crab pot, it was crab gear. It ended up, I think in this one, it was just the 2 bars off the corner post of the large pots, okay? So it broke the wells and ran off, okay? And it gives me an opportunity because, did I do it here? No, I will give you a little background on it. It's taking it from its principal feeding grounds, these high latitude productive areas, and I kind of tried to outline those for those whales that then go to the principal breeding cabin grounds in the North Pacific, which is around the Hawaiian Islands. Okay, so this is one of those subpopulations. This subpopulation, this is where they breed and cap. This is generally the area out to the western end of the Aleutians and kind of into Russian waters, and then Gulf of Alaska, southeast, northern British Columbia. Okay, a little bit of mixing goes on, but strong site fidelity, pretty strong site fidelity. Okay, but those individual impacts, it is things like the obvious ones of gear, cutting through body parts or wrapping tightly around the body. There's that kind of physical trauma kind of stuff. There's infections, because, well, if you're cutting through, that line could be a vector of bacteria, the nasties, okay? There's contributory factors, like you're dragging a bunch of gear, you're spending more time at the surface, you have an inability to maneuver, and a boat comes along, and it's the other threat that gets you, right? So those contributory things, again, infections, ship strikes, just general deterioration of health. You're going to get, your condition's going to decline. You'll get thinner. That you're not as buoyant. You're not staying warm. Other factors come into play. And eventually, you'll get so thin, so weak, you might drown. That's typically the way it plays out. You might drown later on, but not typically immediately. Okay. I think this image here, the youngster, is a young male humpback whale right here. This guy did drown. Okay. But it was a combination of the fisherman helping him, the youngster panicking, the 2 of them working hard, and it just didn't go well in this case. So he did panic and drown. There's impact at the population level as well. I know the number is old, but it's the best one I have. It's from Andrew Reed et al. What they did is they took stranding data from the U.S., and they had good data there that were represented entanglement threat, and then they extrapolated worldwide based on the number of fishing boats. Okay, that's how they got to the worldwide number, because that is worldwide. All cetaceans, and the small whales, dolphins, porpoises, up to the great whales, the large whales. And that's definitely an underestimate, even at that time. It's well beyond that. But this was a conservative value that was based on science. So those are, again, fatalities. Okay? So back to its big threat. And for some species, at the population level, it represents, it's keeping the population down or causing a decline, like the North Atlantic right whale. That would be an example where they're back on the decline. And some of that is because of entanglement threat. Okay? I would argue for our humpback whales here in the Pacific, certainly this population, this Hawaii distinct population segment, they're not being overtly affected by entanglement. Okay? So it's at the population level, not overtly. At the individual level, it's still animal welfare, that kind of thing. At the individual level, it's still there. Okay? Here's some where the initial reports are coming in. It's a couple of years old, so not every yellow dot is there. Okay? You'll see I haven't updated every single data point here. But generally speaking, over 380 reports have been received. About 2 250 of those, a little over 250, have been confirmed. Okay, that we know, we have criteria that represents, we know that's an entanglement. So it's only, if you break that out by years, about 8 per year over the over 3 decades. Now, the last 2 decades, though, it's been close to about, on average, 10 per year. Confirmed cases, not the reports, okay? Large whales. If I add the whales that ran to Hawaii and I pick them up down there, the team down off the green camping grounds pick them up, it jumps up to around a little over 275 confirmed cases. So by the way, that might not seem like very big numbers. You're talking decades, right? But again, it's scratching the surface. It's a needle in a haystack. It's a big needle, but it's a very big haystack when you're looking at the North Pacific. So, and there's other ways you get the numbers. I won't go into those tonight, but we know it's a fairly big threat. That's the message here. So again, reporting underestimates, as well as people are doing out there trying their best to find these whales, and that's what we want to talk about a little bit. It's the first responder role as well that people have. The other impacts, I did mention these already, is there's biological, ecological aspects. You know, one species triggering another species, changing the niche. There's a socioeconomic, things like the fishing industry or whale watching industry, things of that nature. There's a cultural side. I know in Hawaii, they're not on the coolest, but humpback whales are culturally significant to the indigenous community down there. So there's these, you know, they have value there beyond just the ecological and socioeconomic and all. And of course, the other impact is, well, people wanting to help the whale and maybe getting hurt in the process of trying to cut the whale free. And that's why we do these trainings. We were doing the trainings over the last couple of days because it's a matter of safety. It's not always that simple, that's for sure. They're a big animal again, you know, big ocean. So, why does it happen? Okay. Well, some of it, they're just stumbling upon the gear. They're not paying attention. It's cryptic gear. Gillnet, for instance, is meant to be cryptic. Well, for the whales as well. Baleen whales don't have, you know, they don't really do echolocation at the level that dolphins, toothed whales do. Okay. There's inexperience. I've definitely seen this. You'll see a lot of youngsters getting entangled, things like that. So they're just not aware. There's no attraction. And I'm going to only introduce this other side because Dr. Teerlink is going to talk about this in more detail. But they're also sometimes with their animals focused on the gear for some reason. They're playing with it. They're using it as a scratching post. You know, get those barnacles off or something. They're depredating on it. That's what Susie's going to talk more about. They're either taking a bait or taking a catch actively. Humpback whales are not known for this specifically. We did put from Australia humpback whale feeding outside a hatchery where the salmon have been released. That's not good. You know, maybe a couple. I always said like 250,000 in a mouthful could be. You know, it's not. It's almost sad in a sense. And then Dr. Jan Australia also loaned me the clip of the sperm whale picking off the sablefish on a long line. So you guys are probably aware of this. So again, Susie's going to talk more about that. We're going to move on. I have a vocabulary word for you. Thigmotactic. It means they love the sense of touch. And humpback whales are definitely thigmotactic. And I think that gets them in trouble a little bit as well. Very curious animals. So again, the impact is not immediate. This is a yearling with its mother returning to Hawaii. Maybe about 10–11% of them will do that, okay? Early on especially. So even a young humpback whale can come long distances, okay? But that time gives them time, right? It buys them time, and it buys us time to do things like this. Make that cut. That is a yearling, a different yearling, by the way. One probably got caught in pelagic longline gear, probably a couple 100 miles north of Hawaii. Made it to Hawaii. Sharks were after it for a while. You see the sharks were after it. And we were able to get this guy free. And I think I did. Yeah, I did this is that last sweep. And since it goes so fast, I went ahead and did a screen grab showing you that we were able to get 3 cuts from the 3 cuts of to the wraps around the tail there. Okay? So, yeah, tissue is looking a little bad. I think this guy did fine at the end. Got all the gear off. Okay? It isn't easy. We do a lot of training and everything. They're big animals, big ocean. There is a motion across the board. Managers don't want to see it happen. Scientists don't. The fishermen, they don't want to see it happen. Everyone's hoping that the whale will get free and all that. So there's a lot of emotion there. We've got to watch ourselves as responders. So, again, back to relatively few cases. And that makes it challenging because you just don't get that many opportunities to do this, to train, to have the real experience. So John Moran and Fred Sharp there. Okay, here's Fred down at Prince of Wales Island. So this whale's going to react, and it's like we haven't had too many instances, but this whale, it can be dangerous. I'm trying to show that it can be dangerous. You know, and sometimes I've seen worse than this, like where they thrash or they breach and they just miss the boat kind of thing. So we have to watch ourselves. They're big animals. They don't necessarily know you're there to help them. They're individuals in that regard. Some of them, seemingly, I think they do know. And then others are like fighting it from the get-go, you know. So they are individuals, I think, like us in that regard. I have my good days, my bad days. But the value of doing this, you know, even though it's dangerous, is things like, you know, increasing awareness, that promotes stewardship, and gets more people involved. You know, that greater role, greater scope. Then there's reducing the risk to the rescuers, or, you know, public safety. Rather than somebody having to jump in the water and free the whale, well, we've got long poles, we've got these knives we've developed over the years. Let us do it. Let us work with you, kind of thing. That's the message there. Then we free some whales, animal welfare, that's good. But then the big one here is gain some information. It's back to this, there's a lot of science involved here. So we want to gain some information, so, we give it to the scientists, the managers, to the fishermen. I know I worked for fishermen for years, and they were always asking me, can I do this, can I do that, what can I do to fish and not catch a whale? So they knew my background. So lots of value. It all falls under a national program now, so this team here is part of that national program. We've learned over the years that kind of pulling your resources, working as a big team, works better. So I know NOAA Fisheries stepped up years ago. I think I was into about 10 years, and they stepped up and said, we're going to work with you now. We'll give you a little funding. We'll help you with the tools now. So things like that. So it's under a permit. Permit because we could do harm to the whales, as well as just trying to help them in the process. It's very much a community-based effort, though, by the way. I mean, you get government oversight. Government knows they're not paying people to wait for the phone to ring, you know, kind of thing. There's really none of that happening. You know, we have other jobs, and we're on call, kind of thing. So it has a major key community role here. It relies on the community support. I was going to give you one big aspect of that is back to the needle in the haystack. It's reporting. You know, we rely definitely on the community there. Where we are, very few cases of right whales in the East Coast. There's planes going out. There's surveys being done. But otherwise, there's not a lot of that going on. They're certainly not looking for an entangled whale necessarily. Okay? So we rely on the community in that regard. It's optimistic in that regard as well. In this case, I do like Where's Waldo? And there's other roles here. A lot of it is first responder roles. Okay? So not only just finding and reporting the whale, but giving an initial risk assessment. You know, how bad is the animal? How's it wrapped up? Get some pictures for us, and then make that call to the hotline number. That's key. And of course, all the time, staying a safe, legal distance. Don't want anyone to get hurt in the process. But that already is a valuable role that will probably, in the big picture, help more animals than trying to engage the animal yourself. I've documented the cases. It typically does not work out well. Yeah, the ones that did work out well make it to YouTube. But there's so many that don't make it to YouTube. It will boggle your mind. It will scare you a little bit. So it's better to let people that have done the training and have the tools to do this. Community involvement's big. I value estimate over 80% of it. I already did the first responder roles. It's just foundational. I threw a couple pictures. Some of this is local. I wanted to acknowledge the local team here. So, and here, community can help with cutting whales free. So I cheated. I showed a whale being cut free in Hawaii, and the team down there. Drone footage that makes it kind of unique in seeing that. But there's this male with a wrap around the head, and here comes the boat. Put the knife on, and there it is, free. Okay, put a unique perspective on it. So we have trained people and got them involved in cutting whales free as well. But how do we do that? So that's what I'm going to do next. How do we cut these 45-foot, 40-ton whales free? And this is what I was saying earlier. It's modifying, generally speaking, it's modifying a fishing technique. Historical one, no doubt. It's the kegging technique. Remember, a lot of them are mobile, and when they're mobile and diving, how do you gain access to cut them free? So the heyday whaling, so your Gregory Peck Moby Dick movie is playing. You might have seen it on a Saturday afternoon. It's a classic. And as that plays, you saw things like they threw a harpoon. They were not killing a whale by throwing a harpoon at it. They were attaching to it. And they got the Nantucket slave rod. They had those skiffs. They They bent it over the bow, they got the antenna say right, the whale would sound, right? Probably. Most times it sounded. So they had a barrel ready, a keg, ready to be attached, or it was already attached. They threw it overboard, and that one barrel started adding drag and buoyancy. The whale would start to slow down, probably dragged it down underwater, but they'd add another barrel, maybe 2 or 3, and eventually the whale was stuck at the surface, tired out, and then they came along with their lance and drove it deep to bleed the animal out. Okay, so there's your historical 1800s kind of sequence, and we're going to take that. I'm going to show you via video how we've modified this. I'll give you a quick video rendition of the modification, the catch here. So here's our other catch, our catchy phrase. And this is off Lahaina. We're going to honor Lahaina here. This is a Christmas day off Lahaina, and there's the throw. It's entangled. It's got gear trailing. You can't see it, but it's there. It's actually a dark line. It's got an anchor right below the tail. We're on it now, so helmet cam footage. So we have the catch. That's our harpoon. Okay. So I'm going to keep going here because that whale did sound. We had to let go. Now this is a different whale, but this is a youngster, a young male, and it's still going fast. But it came back to surface, and we're going to add polyballs, those balloon buoys, those Norwegian floats, as our kegs, to add buoyancy, to add drag, slow that whale down. So same principle. Okay, we're adding gear to get the gear off. Okay, going to go to the next one. Here's Dave Matilla. Acknowledge him, my mentor. He's behind me. We've added some kegging buoys. The inflatable boat, it's a kegging buoy in a sense. You're standing on it. Okay, so we're getting an anti-slave rod. Probably not being too smart there because the whale's going to win the battle of stamina and all. Okay, but you're testing the strength of it all, and seeing line is shifting. But eventually the whale slows down, stays at the surface, and then you can pull up. If it's an inflatable boat like that, you have the ability to pull up, right behind you. Whales do not go in reverse very well. So being right behind them, you gained access now to get at the entanglement and cut that whale free. The beauty of this whole technique too is those kegging buoys, when you make the cuts, the whale's free, they keep the gear afloat and let you get it out of the ocean, let you recover it, and do a little more science with it to figure out, well, answer the questions of who, where, when, why, and how. Help you in that regard. Mitigation. Okay, so here's 2 different cuts I'm going to show you. One is we call it a fixed knife. The knife stayed on the pole. There was a cut right then. Now what I should explain is there might have been 2 or 3 hours prior to that 10 seconds, just to keep that in mind, okay? So there was some preparation done there, okay? And then here's a fine cut, similar knife, but the knife is going to come off the pole because, I think in this case, it grabbed 2 loops, and it didn't, you felt it, oh, this is not going to cut right away. Rather than take that risk, you let go of the knife, it comes off the pole, you back away, and maybe even add a buoy to the end and let the buoy make the cut for you. So there's that, okay? So what I thought I'd do now, we have limited time, is I thought I would explain more by covering our cases that we've had locally here. You guys have done really well. I've had a couple of cases here, 2 of them in which you totally engage the animal. There's this one back in 2018. We had done a training in 2017, so it was a little prep. It worked out pretty well. Some people were ready, lend a hand, working with the community. We did send John Moran. He had already cut for him at the time, maybe 15 whales, or I don't know, over a dozen will make it. I don't know the exact numbers. So, and he brought some more tools, supplement. So I want to go through this one, and I think I'm going to jump right to this because on the initial risk assessment, they went out and they put the GoPros in the water, trying to figure out how wrapped up is it, where is it wrapped up, what are we going to do here, how are we going to cut this whale free? And this is the images that they got. Multiple tail wraps, it's on the upper left-hand side. Had one wrap across the body behind the blowholes. So that was pretty accessible, by the way. Another image showing the multiple wraps. So semi-anchored, by the way, it would stay anchored for a while, and then lift up the pot and move it a little bit, and put it back down again. Okay, big whale, dog probably. Okay. Oh, and it generally was out, I think it was out here for a while. I remember the waterfall, the cascade was in the backdrop for a while, but I think it generally moved more inshore over time. Okay, there. And then here's what they decided to do. Their first cut, they said, well, that wrap on the top is accessible, and the whale is sitting there. So he took advantage of the fact that it was sitting there. It's a flying knife, John at the bow, I think it's Dan McGowan at the helm, working together. Dan from Resolve. At night you saw the knife come off the pole, you saw John pull the line, make the cut, okay? Trying to stay safe. And then that's one cut, it's looping there. So they got that cut. And I think that, not right away, but let's go to the next clip because I think it sat there for a while. Keep going. Okay, here it is. It's still sitting. You See the loop is gone. They're trying to get at the tail now. They're leaning down, trying to get it, I think, at the bridle line, went back towards the tail. And I don't know if they get it there, but they do eventually get that. Eventually, though, the whale becomes mobile with gear still on it. So things have shifted now, and now they might need to keg. They might need to slow that whale back down a little bit to get it free. So now they're getting a Nantucket sleigh ride. Helmet cam footage. I think John's in the, he's got the pole. I think Andy Dietrich is handling the working line, with the control line, bending over the bow of the inflatable. They're towing behind that whale, and John is trying to time it so when the tail sort of comes up, there's the advantage here, is the tail is at least coming up higher now. It was moving, but the tail, at least in its motion, would come to the surface. Before, the tail was really deep. 40-foot whale, or at least, you're trying to reach down 30 feet next to a whale, not good. So they're doing better now. Let's see, I think they made at least 3 attempts. I think I jumped to the 3rd attempt. I think he gets the knife on right there. Okay, the knife is on around the tail. I think they've already got 1 cut. I think it's the 2nd cut. And he's still holding the boat position. They're trying to keep their distance. And there is a little audio there. And I think right now, John is going, I'm on, but he also says, okay, Andy's gone. There's a buoy next to us, John. And John says, it's okay. And right now, I got the audio too low, but John goes, I think I made a cut. And he has indeed made a cut. And then it doesn't come off right away. It's peeling away. So soon the boat slows down, and the whale's getting free, right? So it's disconnected. And they're all of a sudden they scratch their head going, hey, I think we got the whale free, kind of thing. So, you can already see the boat slowing down. So it's already peeled off, and they're just cruising to a stop now. I'm going to jump to the next, we want to keep this going. We hit, in this case, I wanted to hide the numbers there off the buoy. So they're recovering a cutting grapple. They ended up not cutting because it grabbed too many lines, okay? And they're recovering the gear. And also, even at this point, they're going, making sure there's no whale attached. So they're looking like, there's a line in, there's an end there. And they realize the whale is definitely free. And I think this clip, let's turn that mic off a bit. Yeah, I don't know if you can hear it, everyone. We were free. They have a support boat. I think this city boat there, almost like a harbor master type boat, is lending a hand. So back to community. There was a lot of different people involved here. Okay? I couldn't name them everyone. I probably don't remember. I wasn't here on this one, so you should be careful there too. That's Andy holding up the gear, again figuring out what it was, where it came from. And then we want to jump to just a couple months ago and look at this one. In this case, we're not sure the age of this animal, but I think it's a 2-year-old. It's definitely a youngster, smaller whale. It was anchored as well. And this time, as far as we know, I don't think it ever really moved. It had scope, and it could move on the anchor point, but it was sticking there for days at a time. Both of them were days overall in the response effort. Okay, so it's back beginning of April. Oh, and drone footage there. You can see the whale out there. Is it Iliada? Did I get Iliada?
Iliad.
Bay?
Iliad Bay.
Okay, got it. Okay. I'll let you stay with it, Thomas. Okay, but it was right with the stars. Okay, right out here. Okay, so so we had first responders. Okay, Asia and Ethan Nichols there. Asia Vetter and Ethan Nichols. They from the state. They were able to go out. It was like the 2nd day, I think, with the pole camera and get us initial risk assessment. They did great. Animal cooperated as well. She got the pole cam in the water, and I think I show, here's some of the imagery she got. Again, anchored whale. And anchored whales tend to be more dangerous in some ways. And it's a young whale, they're more unpredictable. So you start to add up the equation here on the risk factor. Hog tie between the mouth and the tail. Pretty complex entanglement in that regard. Keeping at least part of the entanglement deep for us, inaccessible. Okay, going to make it a little challenging there as well. These things were starting to add up right away. We're looking at the Suzie and I, Sadie right there, another image from Asia and Ethan's effort there. So this really set the stage, allowed us to proceed. And what I was going to do here is, Sadie, she's like really your local or regional large whale entanglement response coordinator. And again, it's not her primary job. She's doing other things, but she took this on. And so she was going to come and help this time the community, as well as myself. We looked around. John wasn't available. Fred Sharp wasn't available. So in the end, the guy from Hawaii, I wasn't here yet, made a run for it to lend a hand, okay? I brought a tool with me, and I brought it today. But this, I looked at the case, and when Asia and Ethan described what they had, I was like, that's going to be hard to reach down and get that. And we've been developing this, we call it the whale exoscope. It's a live feed at the end of the pole behind the knife. So you can reach deep and have either a pair of glasses you're wearing or a monitor that you can look at and see what you're cutting below the water. So there's endoscopes for surgeries. We have the exoscope for surgically freeing whales. Now we're trying. We're getting these things now, we hope. So, and I wanted to mention, state troopers, wildlife troopers there were involved. Coast Guard helped us out. So, and this is, and the city was there, and they were helping with drone support and others. It was really cool. So again, community was a big part of this. And Josie's last name, I can't remember right now, but Josie was helping with respiration. And what was it again?
She's with OC.
OC, right. And she was getting respirations and behavioral information shoreside. So it was just a great example. Really, I can't say enough. It was just textbook in so many ways. Coast Guard there in their small boat. And it all came together. The guy from Maui had to dress up pretty warmly. But the animals intermittently at the surface. Let me make sure I'm okay. Hog tied again. The line was deep. So we were trying to figure out how to do this. And that's where the glass is or the monitor. Somewhere you'll see monitor pictures as well. And with that long pole with the knife on the end to make the cuts. I'm going to show you those cuts. Okay, here's the first one. Now you see the in this case we went with the monitor because Ethan was at the helm. He could see as well. That was important. The helm was like the second most important position. So the helm gets the boat in position. He could see the whale. The whale's underwater. And we could pull up next to it. And then I could look too. So you see that's the view right there. Okay. Now, and we got these Bluetooth headsets on, so we're talking to each other, whispering to each other. You can't hear Ethan. You can hear me chatting with Ethan, okay? So if you're wondering, Ed's not talking to himself yet, okay? Okay, let's keep going. Yeah, let's show you this one too. Actually, I should have stayed with that maybe. This is where we've already made a cut. I should, you know what, maybe I can skip. Yeah, I wanted to stay with this one a little longer. We're talking about how to get to the animal. We're timing it. The whale wasn't always at the surface, so you had to wait for the whale to at least come up near the surface. And then we're got to pull in the water early because it would fill with water. Get a little heavy. That would help you get deep enough. You're trying to get down 6, 8, maybe probably more like 8 feet depth, which might seem like that's no big deal, but it's still tricky. Okay. The whale came up. Every 3 minutes or so it was coming up. Sadie's there next to me. She's showing Ethan. Asia's doing data and gear and everything else, safety. She was multitasking. Okay. So let me leave this a little longer because I'm going to show you the cut. I'm trying to sync it a little bit more. I'm watching. You see the whales in the monitor. I thought it was close right there. She's going to confirm it. We're on it. So, I mean, not dramatic at all. That's the way we want it. You know, so there's one cut. So let's keep going now. Okay, I'll shorten this one. I had the 360 camera mounted on the roof of Ethan's boat, so able to get a good view. And here, all I'm doing is, I just want to make it clear that not every single time do we pull up and make a cut. This is one where we went too deep, we aborted, okay? Let's keep going. Because here ends up being the last cut. Whales now stay at the surface pretty much. And Ethan's got the boat position. These 360s make it look a little closer. But I'm trying to get the pole underneath the body, get to the other bridle, by the way. We've cut one bridle from mouth to tail. We're trying to get to the other side, mouth to tail. Okay? One more time. She's like, pat me on, yo. At this point, I'm pretty certain it's rope, because you can feel it. You can feel the difference between extra flipper. When you got whale, it doesn't give much, okay? When you got a rope, it pulls more. So I was like, I got rope. So I went ahead and pulled and cut it. And she confirmed it. Sadie was able to, then she saw it on the monitor. She goes, yes, that's it. You did get it. So she confirmed it. She said later, she said, my face was hurting because I was smiling so much. I thought that was cute, you know? So there's the second cut. Now, we ended up, the whale did not swim off. And we thought, well, man, we're going to have to go to the Anchor Road too. We're going to get everything off because that should have done it. And it did. But the whale had, we call it myopathy. You know, they have a memory. It's like, you know, maybe you're been, you know, all crimped up and everything. And it takes a while to shake it off, you know, the Charlie horse, get the blood flowing again and start moving on. And that's what happened. It was like 15 minutes later, the whale did swim off. And here we are. We got another pole with a camera on the end. We're going, let's get a picture of it, free of the gear. We almost certainly we know it's free. Let's get that. So we're swimming out of the bay. We're pacing along first. Then I'm going to go, Ethan, go ahead and turn in now. You're in a good position. Turn in. And I got the pole ready. Got a camera on the end. So here we are turning in. Ethan did great, by the way. And we're going to dip the camera in there. Get the image. And I'll show you that image in a second. And then he comes up, I said, let's pace it now. This tricky whale definitely got its faculties back because it did the crazy Ivan here. Watch this. You know, it stalls and lets us go by. After we've been pacing it for like 5 or so minutes, you know, we thought, oh, we have a beat on you. We know your pace. You just put the brakes on and let us go right by, and we lost him. That was the drone. If we had comms with the drone, they could have told us that he did the, you know, he did a little double back on us. So there, Ethan's marching along at the pace he'd been doing. And the whale put the brakes on. So, but here's the footage. And at this point, it's favoring the tail still, but there is not a lick of gear on the whale. This little 2-year-old, and it's trying to scull a little bit, but it was like, as far as you can tell, it definitely was using its tail. Some later, because we could see pukas, or at some point we saw pukas. Oh, that's Hawaiian for hole in the water. That's the fluke prints. That's the smooth water from the upwelling of water. So it could use its tail. It was just favoring it for the most part. Going team effort. So I tried to name some of the team members here. There's probably more. Sometimes it's hard to name everyone, okay? It becomes such a team effort. So 2018, with John Moran and the team there. They set the right one, and then took this picture here of the team. We're doing a debrief after the whale's free. Coast Guard, state troopers, and again, his boat is in the center. Ethan Nichols. And then, oh, and I want to point, here's me from this last winter. And I missed him. Okay, so I'm using me to show you we do not get them all. Okay, this whale was very evasive. This is like the 3rd day we've been on it, and it just would not come near the boat. And we finally got that one opportunity, and I don't know how I just blew it. I got the angle of the knife wrong, or something. That was it. So we don't get them all free. Okay, as much as we try. Okay? How has the network done though? In the big picture, we've done really well. Alaska has done exceptionally well. They were some of the pioneers in themselves. I think it's the nature of Alaskans, you know. So I showed some of the teams there. Kate Wynn, Petersburg team. Kate Wynn and Kodiak, by the way. Petersburg, Barrelhorn Springs, Glacier Bay National Park. Chris Gabriel, Janet Nielsen over the lower left there. So very broad base. Oops, what did I do there? I don't know. Okay, it's here. Maybe I just bumped it. Did I bump it? Okay. But we can go back. And I just want to say 230 responses, more than 70 animals free from life-threatening entanglements. You know, these are estimates, by the way. We don't measure every piece of gear, but over 24,000 feet of line removed. Over 160 sets of gear identified for either directly getting it off the animals or documenting as such. And that's Illyria Jensen and myself removing gill net from a whale. That's back in 06. So, on the science side, I want to give you some examples. Not all of the data is up to date. Generally, the message does not change here. For the age classes, lots of youngsters. Relative to the population, it's that inexperience that's coming into play. And then gear types, it's everything and anything, okay? Not always fishing gear. The fishing gear, it tends to be fixed gear. Gear that's set and left, not mobile gear, but fixed gear. Things like shrimp, fish traps, crab traps, things of that nature, long lines. It tends to be that, okay? You see a little bit of that there. And this is the piece of the pie that's known, by the way. There's a big portion I pulled out, the unknowns. There's a lot of unknowns. We don't always know what the gear is, where it came from, things of that nature. Okay? This is that representation of the fact that it's those red lines from our efforts in Hawaii, green canvas grounds for these whales. There are these cases where we know it came from feeding grounds down to Hawaii. They've carried down, and there's a real value. Sometimes I know exactly where. Sometimes I know generally where it came from, based on the identification of the gear or gear type and such. Okay. So there's a couple lines. I put them out here, but white lines typically are going the other way. But we were talking about the fact earlier is Hawaii gear is not as robust as the Alaskan gear. It does not last. It's not very identifiable later. So there's a bit of a bias there. It could be more gear from Hawaii going northward, but we're not figuring it out, that kind of thing. And it's science we have to be careful of. These techniques, proven techniques, developed over time. I would argue the fishermen started the process back when they were whaling, okay? It's evolved over time. The tools are up front. After Susie's talk, if you want to check it out, please feel free. The knives are sharp, okay? Do not get me in trouble with the library or anyone else. Don't test them, okay? But the whole technique, though, involves minimal contact, okay? Temporally and spatially. It's these poles now, I remember they used to be like steel poles. They went aluminum. Now they're carbon fiber. Now you can reach 35 feet on a moderate-sized boat. Reach out and cut your whale free. Much better in that regard. Spyderco blades, you know, these really hard steel, sharp blades, things like that. So it's gotten better, somewhat disciplined, but somewhat flexible too. Every case has been different, you know. Every time I start to think, oh, I know what's going to happen. I know what to do. That is a mistake right there. So I've learned that lesson. So, oh, and by the way, don't, again, work as a team. I definitely would promote that. Don't try to engage the animal yourself. You know, call the hotline number, call your local contacts to help you out. If you don't have, you know, cell phone signal, you can call the Coasties, channel 16 there, they'll relay the call. They're part of the team. Document, we love that. Get an initial assessment. As long as you stay safe, you know, safe distance, legal distance. You know, we don't want anyone to get hurt. And get us the information. And hey, if there's a response going to be mounted one way or another, so you know someone's coming, we like someone standing by and at a safe and legal distance, holding the whale. Again, don't lose the needle in the meantime. So we don't mind that role. Okay? And what is a success? Potentially getting all the lethal gear off the whale. Again, potentially, because you can't, you know, no obligation to any of us to, you know, if it's risky for ourselves, risk to free the whale. We want minimal injuries to the whale on the whale side. I mean, none on the human side. Minimal on the whale side. We want documentation, we want the science, gain information to mitigate a broad-based threat. The animal and otherwise, okay, these other risk factors, broadly speaking. Okay. And how can people help? Well, you can minimize the gear that's in the water or make what you put in there whale safe, things of that nature. Okay, remember, it's anything and anything. Increase awareness and stewardship. Be a first responder. If you're in a situation where that might be a role you can take, help us out in that regard. It doesn't happen very often, but you know, you know the numbers, know generally what we want. That's helpful. And I did put this down. I don't know, we can put this up later, but the QR code for or the website there is like a little 20-minute online course. If you want to share this with friends or something like that, it's just focused on being a first responder towards large whale intent response. Lots of people to acknowledge. Okay, I had to kind of categorize people here, groups, agencies, and at the end it was like, you know, communities and private citizens and fishers. So it's really been very much a grassroots effort with a lot of people involved. An honor to work with everyone. And with that, I want to thank everyone and just show a picture I took years ago when I climbed up Malibu there, and then I will pass the baton on to Suzie there, and she will delve deeper. How's that? My little catchy phrases.
Thanks,
I think I'm so clever.
You are. Thank
No,
you.
I'm not.
I'm going to talk about killer whales, and my talk will be maybe 20, 30 minutes.
Can you
Probably 20.
transfer the
Yeah, just transfer
mic
the mic.
first?
Oh, sorry. I forgot about it.
Yeah. So,
Quick.
anyways, I'll do kind of a shorter run through. I came up here in part to work with Ed and help to deliver the large whale entanglement training. How's this? So just go like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it should just clip to a pocket or wherever you want to clip it to.
Something. I got it.
Okay.
Thank you. So I came up here to help with large whale entanglement response training. And just like Ed said, we all So I'm based in Juneau. I'm at the regional office for Alaska in the Protected Resources Division. And we all have a lot of different job descriptions. But one of the primary things that I do is help to manage the data and information that we have about marine mammal bycatch and fisheries in Alaska throughout the entirety of the state. And I have, here we go. And I'm less familiar with the fisheries in this area of the state. I've been in Southeast Alaska for 22 years, and I've been, really happy to be part of that community and the fishing effort there. And I really love working with fishers. But I'm really excited to be here, first time in Dutch Harbor, and more recently I've been delving into killer whales because they've been a pretty hot topic. There's lots of different killer whales in the world. These are all different ecotypes, different ancestral groups. And in Alaska, we have just 3 different types. We've got the residents, those are the fish eaters. We have the transients, also the bigs, those are the mammal eaters. And then the offshore whales, those are whales that focus on sharks. Residents and transients are what we see most. And interestingly, even though both of these live in and amongst one another, these 2 whales are so different that they haven't interbred for 300,000 years. And there's a new paper that's come out that says that they are potentially a separate species, and they're being considered now. I love this angle. You can kind of see that difference in the saddle patch here. This is one of the ways that we can tell them apart visually, but for them, culturally, dialect, the language they use, the things they eat, entirely different. Killer whales are very intelligent. They're clever, and they are looking for opportunities to get high-quality food. And they're going to be finding and innovating new ways to get food, even if that means leveraging it from humans. This is a picture from Iceland, and believe it or not, that's actually a real picture, so it's pretty incredible. But one area in which we're starting to see more killer whale interactions with fisheries, and especially in news and media, you always tend to think of these things as new and emerging. But killer whales have been interacting with humans and leveraging humans for food for ages. And the idea of killer whales following humans is not new. This is one of the more famous historical events where killer whales were using humans for food. It's in Eden, Australia, at a whaling station in Twofold Bay in mid-1800s going into the mid-1900s. And whalers in this area got to know a certain group of animals that actually participated in whaling. And the way that this all came about, and the way that this works, is that this whaling station was shore-based. So they're out there in wooden sea dories, harpooning, kegging whales, bringing them into the shore-based station, but they're doing all of their flensing and processing by hand. It takes days for them to break these animals apart and render them the blubber. And in the meantime, they anchor the whale into Fold Bay, and they go to sleep every now and again, and the killer whales would come in and eat the tongues out of the baleen whales. I don't know why, but killer whales really like that. It's like their delicacy. And even in the wild, when a pod of killer whales will kill a baleen whale, that's what they do. They go right into the ventral pleats. They eat the tongue out, and then they move on. But they often don't eat more. There's plenty of meat there. But so that's what they wanted. And they got used to the idea that if there was a whale anchored in the bay, that they would get their reward. They would get that tongue out of the animal. And they're so smart that they started to help and literally assist the whalers in trying to make a successful landing of a whale. This is a humpback whale, a killer whale named Old Tom, one that they like, and literally pushing the whale into the whaling boat. So those types of stories are, there's many of them, but this one is just within the range. There's a few photos and enough survivors to kind of piece together and really document that history. Now back to Alaska, killer whales are doing this in different ways. So in Alaska, our main culprits are the residents, not the mammal eaters like we were seeing in Eden, Australia. Here, we're seeing what the killer whales look like fish. And, you know, it's odd, but they really know the good quality fish. You know, they're really into the sablefish, the halibut. They like the high quality, high value. And so we'll talk about the different ways that they're interacting. But I want to just take one moment to point out that this is not something that is just in Alaska. It's found all throughout the world. Again, killer whales are really smart. They leverage humans for food. And they're doing it in a couple of different ways. Depredation is one of the words that we use for removing caught fish from gear. And so depredating is one way they're interacting. The others might be feeding on discards or other things that are going over the side. And in Alaska, this happens for a lot of different fisheries. Salmon are being pulled off of troll fisheries in southeast. Recreational fishers report killer whales coming in, getting their gear. I really like this picture of recreational fishing, because I just feel like this is like my life, right? I go out in my boat with my friends, and we all have a fish on, all at the same time. We just keep catching them. That's the way it works. In longline, there's opportunities for feeding on discards, but killer whales will often come during the haul back, and they'll take fish off of hooks as the gear is being hauled back in. But interestingly, the killer whales are actually really capable of diving quite deep, and there was a recently documented case where a killer whale was able to depredate at a depth of 1,600 feet. So incredibly deep. They can go down there and feed right off the bottom. Oh, there you go. This isn't from around here. This is Patagonian toothfish, but it's a great video, and I wanted to share it. And in part, just show how graceful they are. They both use whatever visual they can, but they have incredible echolocation, which helps them to see the fish in front of them with sound, and they can come right up to fish, pick them off the line, and avoid the hooks for the most part. And even what they'll often do is just remove the meat only. And this can be really effective and can reduce the overall catch so much that, as most of you surely know, there's been a shift towards new gear types. In particular, a slinky pot is a collapsible pot, which is easier to put on a smaller boat and has made it so that more boats can adopt pots as a way of fishing. And so, here the killer whale might be able to come up to the side of the pot. There's fish that can go into there. This is being replaced. The pots are at the bottom. The killer whales, they're gone, right? No. They're always just one step behind, right? So it has been helpful, and huge portions of fleets have switched, but we're still seeing innovative killer whales who are now finding their way around pots and learning more and better how to remove fish, open up the mesh, and get the reward. So trawl is another interaction, both non-pelagic and pelagic trawl. And there's regulatory discards here. So there's stunned halibut and other fish that are going over the side, and killer whales are pretty savvy to that. They like halibut a lot. So we previously have considered this to be the primary interaction that's been happening with trawl, is that feeding on discards right there at the boat.
Can they get into conventional pots as easily as I can get in a slinky pot?
hard-sided, the rebar, not as easily. And they can't pull them off of the bottom as well. They can't pull them off of the line as well.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that they wouldn't try. And we don't really know what they're, fully capable of. But the slinky soft pods are more susceptible. Yeah. So this is a trawl boat pulling in. There's a caught end of the net, and killer whales coming up for bite to eat. This is a photo of the discard chute. You can see a killer whale just right there, right in position. You can imagine them just, swimming alongside the boat. And in fact, killer whales can follow trawl boats around for weeks. They have learned to sort of follow the fleet around. And so while this is innovative, while this is a really easy and energy efficient way to get food, it's genius in some ways, but of course it is risky. And the more interaction that a killer whale has, the more likely there is to be negative consequences. We recently published a report on killer whale entanglements in Alaska, summarizing data from 30 years, looking at all different types of entanglements and gear types. If you're interested, it was a useful exercise to try to look for trends, understand a little bit more about what types of interactions are happening and whether or not they're the stumblers or the benefiters, whether they're coming in to depredate or there's some kind of draw or benefit to them. And as you know, there was a higher than usual number of killer whales bycaught in the trawl fishery in the Bering Sea Aleutian Islands in 2023. And this generated a lot of interest from everybody. It's concerning, it's unusual, and much higher than we had seen previous. So here's some data of killer whale and trawl interactions over the years. And a couple things to point out. These aren't fine polished data, but just kind of trying to understand and put in context what we saw last year in this bigger picture. So there's a spike. There are several more killer whales than we normally had seen, more than had been seen in any single year. But also that isn't just 1 year, it's been an increase over the last few years. The other thing to note is that there's also been propeller strike mortalities that have been documented. Many of the fleet adopted propeller guards, which really helped with that. So that's a gear innovation. This is humans thinking about how do we have this problem. There's these propeller strikes happening. How do we mitigate that? And we see propeller strikes still, but not nearly as much. So, NOAA Fisheries, along with a lot of other people, are really interested in understanding why 2023, why the increase, what's going on here. And it's complicated, and we're still really trying to tease this apart. But one thing that is certainly new to most researchers is that we always thought they were up there at the discard chute, and that was it. We thought that's where they were feeding. And last summer, even before any unusual numbers or media, the Amendment 80 fleet had a researcher, Dr. Hannah Meyer, come out on their boats to study killer whales. And she put these hydrophones in the water on the net to try and understand a little bit more what was happening at depth. And she found that killer whales are feeding at the net. And it's super risky behavior. For whales to be coming down there where the fish is corralling and picking off what they want. And we don't know if this is a learned behavior, new behavior, but that might be something that's coming into play here. If there's a continued habituation, if whales are viewing fishing vessels as a source of food, and then they start trying new things. Start poking around a little bit more, teaching each other because they are cultural learners. That is super concerning to all of us and potentially part of the explanation. NOAA Fisheries is what they call, initially they were calling it a parachute, but then today I talked to somebody who was calling it a whale fence, and I like that. This kind of sounds more appropriate. It's a physical barrier. It's not 100% of the net, but it's a large portion of the net, and the hope is that there's some physical barrier for preventing killer whale bycatch. So, that is in play. That is being used by in the deep water flats from the Amendment 80 fleet, and we're hopeful and we're innovating, right? Overall, depredation, feeding on discards, it's bad for fishermen. It reduces catch rates. It can increase the operational costs through gear, having to steam away, go to different areas. It can cause all kinds of trouble for fishers. And it's bad for whales. There's a risk of entanglement, and it's also this altered foraging strategy. If there's growing a dependence on an unnatural food source, they're no longer innovating in how best to find food in their environment. They're relying on us. But there is no easy fix, and that we are sure about, and we've seen so much innovation from the whales as they continue to learn, and we're continuing to try to come up with new ideas. So there's not like a silver bullet. There's not one thing that we could do. There's not one pinger or one answer. But we continue to work through this. And I think it's worth noting that interactions like this, habituation, are not unique in this way. We have problems with trash bears, there's stellar sea lions, other animals that as they lose that self-reliance and start to rely on humans, it just becomes, puts them more and more at risk. And certainly, can down the road lead to us, having to euthanize animals or just otherwise being more of a risk by interacting with human activity. So, we don't have answers, and what I will say is that I've just really enjoyed the conversations that I've had and with fishers in this community, with managers, and I'm trying to learn more about this so that I can help put my mind into this problem. We have killer whales that are just too smart for their own good, and they really do. They're in their environment. They know their water, and they are not going away. So, what can we as humans do to try to make the best of both worlds? And I, in part, was really wanted the opportunity to speak to help me find those in the community who can help teach me. So it's kind of backwards. If maybe some of you who have experience working around killer whales could give a talk, I'd love to come to it. But I think that we are all in the same boat, and one of the reasons that I love working in fisheries is because I love fish, but also we're on the same side. I've never met a fisher who wants to injure a whale or even have a whale around. They never asked for this. This isn't something that seems to be, it's not popular. It's not something that the interaction was never provoked. And so we're, working together to try to find those solutions, and I am excited to learn more and look for opportunities. So thank you so much. We have time to list just whale soup. It could be large whale entanglement. We could talk killer whales. What do you guys want to talk about?
Well, what's the difference in species? I mean, is there a very technical difference between two different whales being two different species and they look the same, act the same, acts like a duck?
That's such an interesting question. It's almost like a philosophical debate at what level of genetic differentiation you need in order to be separate species, and there's arguments about can they interbreed, but then there's hybrids, and I don't know. I stay out of it. I think what's interesting out of it is that there's long history without interbreeding and developing these and honing these hunting skills so much that they aren't overlapping in their diet at all. And that's fascinating to me, but I don't actually have an opinion about whether they should be called separate species.
Yeah, very detailed, yeah.
Yeah.
But back to the crab pots. So, do you have any percentage of how many times they get slinky pots versus targeting conventional pots?
No, I think that there's no obligation for a fisher to report that their gear was depredated. So we don't have a consistent, way of monitoring that. And in fact, it's not always obvious, if it has been. And so there's, you have a tear in mesh, and you might have killer whales around, and did it happen from the killer whales? So we don't have a good, data on those. I don't know, Josh, if you have anything.
I would only say that slinky pots are relatively new. And for the record, I'm Josh Keaton. I'm with the regional office, and I'm on the management side. I'm not on the protected resources. So 20 years of in-season management, and I talk to the fishermen. I'm the head of the monitoring branch right now, so anything observers or whatever else. So slinky pots are relatively new, right? Came out in 2020, right? We've seen a complete shift in our fishery from a long line, 90% long line, 10% pot, to now 80% pot, 20% long line. And that is the innovation of slinky pots. So the data is a little bit new. It's only a couple of years. So entanglements, whale depredation, like she said, the whales are always ahead of us, right? So the fleet changed from long line to pots to get away from whales. Now whales are figuring out, oh, I don't got that easy meal. How can I get that? And we definitely know that there's certain areas of the state where they're figuring out how to open up the pots.
Yeah, it's totally an arms race, and they're working on pots that are reinforced with steel mesh, right, Asia? So like using stronger materials, and they're getting into those, and they're pulling the pots off the long line. So
this was a huge shift in our fishery, right? We're still figuring out what that means from a fishery management, let alone the impacts to whales and everything else. I can tell you one thing, sablefish pots eliminated bycatch in the sablefish longline fishery. So that's a good thing for us from a management perspective. It virtually target species like pollock, right? 95% target species with pot gear on sablefish.
Instead of what, halibut or something?
Yeah, so if you're using a long line, right, they catch about 60% target species, 40% is bycatch, rockfish, halibut, turbot, whatever else, right? But pot gear, 95% sablefish. Almost no rockfish bycatch. So, pretty clean fishing. So great from a resource management perspective, great from the reduction of depredation that we knew about, but now we might have introduced a new measure, right? That we're going to figure out.
And what is yet to be determined or understood is the magnitude of depredation. So the way that animals become habituated is they give reward. It worked. They found food and it was successful relative to natural sources. And so if it's harder to get into the pots, that's good. If they're not as efficient at their depredation, that could be helpful. But again, we have whales that are not only really good at this, but they also are really good at teaching each other about it, which makes it challenging. Yeah. I'm gonna think of a question for Ed. I'm feeling a little on the spot, so I was thinking I might just shift to.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you say, so it's depredation, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that's partially, what's, I guess, the motive behind it? Is it because the whales are hungry, or are they bored? Or what are your thoughts behind that?
I think that it is about the easiest calories. I think that they are taking advantage of fish that they don't have to chase to eat. And there are several theories swirling around that aren't understood yet. So I can talk about them, but I'm not. We don't have a study that has like tried to tease these things apart. But there, one theory is that the king salmon, which is one of their primary prey sources, is decreased enough that they're having to search for other food and being more, looking for innovative ways to find food. So that could be at play. Another theory is that the pot fishery, or the longline fishery switching to pots would make less depredation on hooks available, and that those killer whales are now more turning to trawl. So there might be several interactions and interplays happening that are, working all at once, and then potentially some new behaviors. But there's no directed effort on this yet, so it's all just guesses. Yeah.
So with depredation, we saw the one video of a sperm whale pulling a fish off a long line.
Yeah.
So is there any other significant cases of sperm whales also doing depredation, or is this primarily with the orcas?
Yeah, there are. I have all these, slides that didn't make it in, and it's the first one. How did that ever happen? It's like 20 slides I could have been through. Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's lots of recorded depredation on longline here, and this is showing sperm whales versus killer whales. So we got sperm whales in the pink and killer whales in the blue, and what we're noticing is that so this area, they just get hammered by sperm whale depredation. If you go down to Southeast Alaska and you talk to sablefish longliners out of Sitka, and they have a different number one least loved animal. It's not the killer whales; they're after the sperm whales. But what we're seeing is that killer whales are coming more eastern, and sperm whales have been seen in the Bering Sea. So we think that as the behavior transmits through these communities of whales, sperm whales also very smart, that it's spreading in both directions. So, not good news. Yeah.
So you mentioned that fishers aren't obligated to report depredation. So what is prompting them to do so when they do report it, and do you have any incentives to maybe get more people to talk about what's going on their ships?
That's a great question. And so I'm going to back up and say that there is an obligation to report any serious injury or mortality of a marine mammal during the course of fishing. That's the only way that a fisher can actually ensure that they aren't personally liable for that take. So that's the motivation, is that that take is covered as long as it's reported. So in those instances where there's not an injury to the whale, and there's just depredation happening, we have different examples of this kind of coming up. In Southeast Alaska, there's a grassroots effort called Southeast Alaska Sperm Whale Avoidance Program, and that is truly fishers and biologists working together to reduce depredation and try to think about ways to mitigate it. And so that's been really fantastic and localized. Like I said, it's the same goal, right? Everybody wants the same thing. NOAA Fisheries doesn't have something dedicated to this, and we don't have the means and the mechanism to do that. But this area and some of these big shifts that are happening, I think that there's more and more interest in trying to get a handle on that, and then try to find the ways to make reporting easy and get and study it in an objective way where you can handle having what reports you get, and try to not have biased data, but setting up a study essentially.
The only thing I would add on the reporting is a lot of our depredation reports are coming from our observers that are deployed on the ship. So, using the term, they're not obligated to report, right? The obligations of a fishing or vessel operator to report is to report their total catch that they brought in, right? Yeah. Our observers are there to collect the bycatch and the things that might impact that. And we use those observer data to estimate rates to the fisheries. So as she discusses whale depredation, right, there are, as part of the stock assessments for the ground fish of sablefish and stuff, estimates on the amount of whale depredation, because, that's cause mortality. We're bringing that fish up to the surface and a whale stacking on it. We should assess that as part of our catch, right? So that's all part of the stock assessment, and our observers collect that information. Vessel captains, as we know, come and talk to us about depredation all the time. They don't like it. They want to know how to reduce it, how to eliminate it, or whatever else. So, I think that the majority of fishermen, if they're getting depredated on, I'm getting those phone calls all the time. It's the collecting it in a database and in a mechanism that is available to the protected resources, research scientists and stuff that we're still trying to figure out.
Right, and we have a lot more of that data coalesced in the observed fisheries, or the fisheries with higher proportions of observation, whereas it gets less with long line and pop.
I have a question for Ed.
Yeah, yes.
So, one of your first slides was showing all the whale entanglements, right?
Yep.
And if anybody knows Alaska, which I think most in this room know, it was very localized to the communities.
Oh, yes. Effort-based, back to the effort side of things. Yes, it's where whales are, but the other side is, hey, if you're reporting, it's got to be where people are. So you have these epicenters around the communities where the reports are coming in. So again, once again, another bias in the data set that we're aware of, but hard to resolve. Unless you put nice random sampling, surveys, or some other mechanism to get away from the opportunistic reporting. You have that bias.
I have a follow-on question.
Yeah.
Never asked you this, Ed. So, along with that, often when a whale is entangled, they'll run, right? And so, that needle in the haystack. How often do we have reports that are just one and gone? But then, of course, you don't know if it shed the gear or just died, or if it was never seen again. But I'm wondering, how often do they go out of that reporting zone?
How do we know they ran?
Yeah.
Well, in some cases they were tagged.
Yeah.
So there's another tool we have, and I was talking about suction cup tagging earlier. Okay, that's a little different. We're using that tool a little differently, but we have a response tag as well. And that response tag is attached to the entanglement to give us additional opportunities to cut the whale free. Okay? And sometimes, especially early on, that's what Suzie's alluding to, is the fact that typically when they first get entangled, they're just stressed, they're gonna try to throw it. And they tend to be runners. And sometimes we caught that animal, so to speak, earlier on. We found the animal early on enough that the tag was on, and we basically tracked the run away. There's been a couple of cases where, I remember one case, Monterey Bay, the whale was seen within a day. They responded, they were able to get the tag on, couldn't cut the whale free, and the whale ran all the way down to Baja, just circled around there, and started coming back, and pretty much made it all the way back to Monterey. And then the transmitter finally fell off, or something like that happened. So thousands of miles it ran. A lot of times it's hundreds of miles. Then they realized, oh crap, I gotta live with this. I can't get it off. This isn't working. I gotta keep feeding. I gotta keep making a living. I'm just gonna have to. I'm big. I'll just drag this thing along until, again, eventually the decline does occur. It does impact them eventually. Yeah.
Is there any concerted effort to dredge for old gear that might be left around places where they might pass by?
Gear recovery programs, ghost gear programs and things like that. I know there was a point in time I started, but not started, but there was one point I was doing the rescue stuff, and I did walk away and started working with fishermen, realized, well, let's work with the source, work with fishermen. And at that point, we were doing things like gear recovery. This is back east, Massachusetts, with some of the early ghost gear removal, it worked out well. They got their gear back, at the same time they got a little extra money, especially if stocks were declining. It was a way to supplement the incomes. And I remember we did that, and we started doing gear mods, and even doing gear exchange. Things like floating line, which were looping off the bottom and were causing entanglements. We were like, how about using sinking line instead? And first it was we've been using, this floating line forever, and it's hard to get fishermen to change, and also it's the money. Line is sold, or at least was sold, by its weight, not by the length. So sinking line costs more. So we did buybacks, and that I think it was said, we'll make up the difference in the cost of that line. You bring it in, on the back of your truck, in the pickup bed, go to the weigh station, weigh it, and we'll give you a ticket to go to the nearest supply store and get the equivalent in sinking line, things like that. So I threw in an extra one there on you, so not just the. Yep.
I have a question for you.
Okay. Sure.
How do you determine if a entangled whale is a candidate to have a satellite tag or a tracking tag put on?
Okay. So yeah. One, it's a life-threatening entanglement, and we feel like we can make a difference. We feel that we can cut that whale free. It's a candidate. It's life-threatening entanglement. The animal's not going to throw it on its own. From our scar analysis, we do know that a lot of whales, they just have scars on them from entanglements. We're not saving that many. We know that some of them are going to just get rid of the gear on their own. So we know that whale needs our help, and we can help. And so we're even doing things like we have the right resources, the right tools. The weather is conducive over a span of time to help on that, to cut that whale free. Let's use the tag to give us another opportunity. Right today, it's too rough, or it's too late in the day, or that whale is just got entangled and it's fighting it right now. Too dangerous for us to get close and cut it free. So we put the transmitter package on. Those are some of the criteria. Put the transmitter package on and wait a day or two, or to the next weather window, or whatever it might be, to respond. Maybe we're gathering more resources, gathering more tools, getting more help, that kind of thing. So, yeah, Thomas.
So when we're talking about like a life-threatening against a non-life-threatening entanglements, what are some of the signs, like characteristics between the two?
Good question. What are the criteria? And it's things like whether there's full wraps around the body. How tight are those wraps around the body? Are they cinched tight? Are they embedded? The amount of gear involved, the type of gear involved. Okay, so a whale that's dragging up, thousands of feet and bundles of gear would be a candidate. Again, tight wraps. The type of gear is things like rolled up gill net, or it's like almost like spectral line. That's really tough for the animal to get out of. Some of this monofilament long line is strong enough they can't break it, and yet small diameter is very lethal. It doesn't take much drag or being cinched around the body to cut in through the flesh. So those are some of the criteria. And that's the gear side. Then there's the animal side of things. A youngster is more likely, it's smaller animals be more likely to be impacted by the entanglement. So a calf versus an adult, that thing, kind of thing. And species aspects. A more endangered species is going to be a higher candidate in that regards. This gets a little bit towards the status of response too. How much resources might you put towards saving the animal? You can even go with those like a right whale, North Atlantic right whale. A female is going to be more valuable than a male. That kind of thing. Might put more because she has more chance to help the population. So some more resources we can put towards freeing her. So those are some of the criteria, from the gear to the animal to its status.
Yeah,
All come into play.
also mention about how we know that whales are shedding gear on their own at certain times because of scarring.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We do scar analysis. For humpback whales, we're doing the fluke IDs anyway. We're out there getting the tail comes up and it's the 15-foot wide fingerprint of a humpback whale. But if you were to take pictures of their flanks, a lot of entanglements migrate. Again, as they're trying to get rid of it, it'll migrate aft and catches on that big wide 15-foot wide fluke, and you'll get scars there primarily, but other places as well. Flippers, wraps, all coming out of the mouth, you'll see it. But a lot of those are a little cryptic. They're not showing up surface-wise unless you've got a pole camera, or maybe get lucky in a drone overhead, you're missing this. But the tail, when they come up, you got that picture, do the analysis. And I know in Hawaii we're coming up around 20% of the whales, humpback whales, have scars indicating they've been recently entangled. Janet Nielsen from Glacier Bay National Park Service, northern Southeast Alaska, that's already 15 or more years ago, around 50% of the humpback whales had scars indicating they've been recently entangled. Again, we're doing a great job collectively, but we are not freeing that many whales from these entanglements. They're doing it themselves in many cases. They're not lethal in that regard. Having said that, though, we should remind everyone, remind ourselves, that that's just yet still one piece of the puzzle. It doesn't tell us. That says nothing of who who succumbed and the needle just sunk or drifted away into the North Pacific, that big haystack, and was never counted. So it's little pieces. That's all we ever do. So we get these little pieces, and we go. But there's these little biases, and we're putting the piece of the puzzle together. And we got maybe half the puzzle, and we're sort of getting a picture of what's going on. And that's what we all do. The scientists, the managers, the fishers, they're all playing the same game of trying to get a picture of how to mitigate this, from different angles. Yeah.
Is there any concerted effort to, or the possibility to replace that sort of monofilament spectral line with something that is less lethal to the whales?
In that case, that particular example, no, that I'm not that I'm aware of, okay? But other examples, there are attempts to, do gear modifications or change practices in one or the other. And it does come back down to sort of the question that Thomas was asking is like, the threat overall, whether it's the number of reports coming in or it's the status of the animals that are involved, okay? So things like back east, New England waters, with those North Atlantic right whales, there's definitely a push. First, it was like get rid of the floating line, make it sinking line. Now they're trying to get rid of those vertical lines, the buoy lines, and you've probably heard this, but the ropeless gear. It starts to get high tech. I mean, from a fisherman standpoint, I bet you they're like, this is the kind of thing. It's not simple anymore. It can be costly, but these transducers on boats that ping the gear and cause a release of a buoy that comes floating to the surface, so that you can now recover your gear, and then as it's on the back of the boat and you're getting your catch, there's a machine that coils it all back up again and triggers it again with a new release, and then you throw it overboard, and next time when you're over the gear again, you can ping it with the transducer off the boat, send the signal down, and up comes the buoy again. Ropeless gear. They're trying to eliminate the buoy lines, the vertical lines in the water column. And if you've ever been in New England waters, I was a captain there for a while, there is a lot of vertical lines. It's literally hard sometimes to get in and out of harbors. I remember coming out of, I got to get fuel in Kennebunk, Port Maine. I caught a pot. You always carried your scuba tank in your gear. I jumped in the water and was clearing my pot. And I came out, there was a helicopter hovering over me with a machine gun aimed at me. And it was George Bush's compound was nearby. So when they saw the guy get in the water, they came out and checked me out, So, little story. I threw a story in there. But yeah, that's my example of gear mods. It's a big one for New England with the right whales. So,
I'm going to ping you to mention something that I want you to say to help the community get more involved.
okay.
How do you measure success rates? How do you know you were successful or a whale survived?
Okay. That's a really good question. Because when I first did, Josh was mentioning data, and you need to get the quantification on everything. And let's see, I gotta make sure I don't lose my track on this. But ping me again. What was it?
Do you want me to take it?
How do you know you were successful?
Oh,
and know
I know what it was. Okay, so at first with entanglement response, it was like, is the whale free kind of thing. I measured success on did we free the whale. And then over time I was like, sometimes you can't even go out and free the whale. You just know, it's like, so success could be, I was able to get out and photograph the whale and document who it was, or I was able to figure out what the gear was. I got pieces of the puzzle, and that by itself was success. It depended on the mission, right? It depended on what your overall goal was. Was it to go out and free the whale? Okay, maybe if you didn't, but maybe it was just to go out and get information. Remember, when I talked about that first section, we know, freeing whales is a band-aid. It's in a sense, it's like doing beach cleanups. The beach the next day, the ocean brings more debris onto the beach, right? You could do that, but it's temporary. What you want to do is get at the root of the source of it as much as you can. And okay, you're not going to totally eliminate it, but you might knock it down by 10% or 20%. Doing that is more valuable. So that information becomes critical towards that goal. Okay, the data, the science. I used to say the science behind entanglement response. I don't even say disentanglement anymore. I say entanglement response. I used to say science behind. I'm saying the science in front of that entanglement response. That's how important the science is, and that's where we're saying success lies more. The data is that important that success measure comes, did we get information? Not necessarily did we free a whale, okay? It's did we get the information? And that helps everyone. And it'll help other whales. I'm not being, you know, you're going to help more whales. You're going to help the other stakeholders there too. And you want to add?
I do, but
Okay.
I don't know if this is where Asia was going, but I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this toe, my toe in the door, because this is good. So there's an online platform for matching whales, in particular humpback whales. It's called Happy Whale, and it's incredible. It's revolutionized the way that we do science. And one of the things really cool about it is it is available and accessible to everybody, and it is truly one of the best ways I've ever seen for the general public to do citizen science and participate. So if you get a picture of the underside of the fluke of a humpback whale, you can go onto the website, upload it, and an algorithm, a computer will match it for you to the entire world. For us, that's
Within reason.
yeah. But anyone that's any other whale that has been identified in the North Pacific Ocean. And it turns out that the algorithm's really good at it. And I've been studying humpback whales for a long time. Ed's been studying humpback whales for a long time. I went into this new technology super skeptical, and I believe. I mean, I've gone through my data set and fixed errors that I was sure humans wouldn't make. So you can upload your images, and the coolest thing is you can get an email sent to you when your whale is spotted anywhere else in anywhere. So I chose this with my Happy Whale account. I chose this feature where I can get a consolidated, just one email, with a bunch of them. And usually they come in at night, and one of the things I do before I go to bed is look at where all the whales showed up. And you can see them in Maui, or you can see them there. But we have learned that some of the outcomes of some of the disentanglements, we didn't know exactly at the time if the whale was truly free, if it was living well, and that's setting that up. Go for it.
I'm going.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
running with
Yeah,
this.
just do it.
This is my latest example of what Susie's talking about. Because whenever we had these cases, we cut a whale free, I was like begging all the different researchers through the North Pacific, can you look through your catalog? Can you keep an eye out on this whale? We got a fluke of it, and again, now it's on the phone. I got the app. I can just do it real quick on the phone. But this whale we cut free in 2017. Okay, it was a young whale. It was we thought it was like a 3 or 4 year old. Okay, we didn't even know the sex. We never got a good sex shot of it or anything. But it was cable, by the way. It was like 850 feet of cable through the whale's mouth. And it had been dragging across the coral. It was bedded in the back of the mouth. It was kinked so much I couldn't even pull it out. We tried to pull it out of the whale's mouth, and we were just towing the poor guy around. And I was like, stop. We got the cable cut. We had to go get cable cutters. We didn't even have cable cutters. So we cut the cable, and it had about, had like 20 feet on each side of the mouth, and it swam off, and I was like, at the time I was like, I don't think that whale's ever going to make it. This year, February, literally a couple 100 yards from where we cut it free, Site Fidelity, she showed up. Now we know she has a calf. So she was probably she was a 3-year-old. She's sexually mature now, and not a hint of any cable. They didn't show any underwater pictures, but someone got the fluke shot. Just the general public got the fluke shot, submitted it to Happy Whale, and Happy Whale pinged us. You get a little text, you get a little email going, and of course these things they send you a personal email going, Ed, the whale you got, they're that good. They go, Ed, the whale you guys got free, we found it again. Some Joe Schmo found it, took a picture of it. So that's really super cool. Because
it's just such a cool citizen science tool, and this area in particular is really undersurveyed, and we don't know a lot about the whales here. And so just a plug for if you get an opportunistic photo, go ahead and do that. It's fun on your end, but it also is truly contributing to science. This is an area we do not survey enough.
Just a quick follow-up question, right? I mean, you're in Maui, huge whale watching, probably millions of people go out whale watching every year. Juneau, we know probably 1 million people go out whale watching every year.
Yeah,
right?
Maui.
So, do we get a good estimate of the population of whales in those areas from using these citizen science tools?
Yep. We just, a new paper just came out. And I mean, for Maui, I know I was looking through the data, and it's like, it used to be the researchers down there would provide most of the data. Oh, not now. I mean, I would say Whale Watch Boats Public is like 80, 90% of the fluke IDs. Now, granted, they don't get all the details, whereas we get details. We might get the sexy animal, what role they're playing, okay, but still, it's a lot of data. And Happy Whale has taken point, okay, and a bunch of researchers working together, gosh, I think it's like 60-something, 62 researchers are on the paper. That's a one long list of co-authors, okay? But everyone pulling their data together, looking at this, and they did market recapture estimates, ratio analysis, looking at, you reach out and you get all these fluke IDs, and then you do it again the next season, and you compare the ratio of what you got, and you get a population estimate. And so what that population said for the North Pacific is they said it peaked in 2012, around 2012, late 2012, it peaked, and it was 34,000 humpback whales in the North Pacific, okay? Then the heat wave came, okay, the marine heat wave, and it was the trifecta. It was El Nino, it was the North Pacific Decadal Oscillation was on the positive phase, which meant warmer water on this side of the North Pacific. And then there was the blob, the different kind of warm salt water. It hit everyone, right? It hurt everyone. It hurt humpback whales. And they estimated the numbers declined after that point. 7,000 humpback whales were missing, okay, probably lost, okay. Some shifted to different areas, but 7,000 was estimated to have not survived that stressor, okay, of having less food in their case. Okay, now lately, that was over a couple years, the last couple years, they've been steadying off and climbing a little bit again. So, but we think they're at or near carrying capacity. Those estimates are saying that they're probably getting close to the resource level, and something like a humpback whale is probably going to level off, maybe do a little valley peak thing here. We'll see. Time will tell. So very excellent. It's, I have to say, fluke IDs are so foundational. It's benign. You just take a picture of a whale, and you get everything from movement patterns and migration and population estimates, and it's just and survivorship. It is an amazing tool to have. You don't do anything to the whale. You don't even put a suction cup on. You just take a picture.
It's a little addictive.
Yeah.
Like, they're being like, did
Is
this one
Maui
get
the
sick?
island they mostly hang out?
That is one of the areas of pretty high densities. That island, the waters that are protected between Maui, Molokai, Lanai, and Kohalave. There's shoal waters is one of the highest density, generally speaking, of humpback whales in that breeding calving time.
So what's it about the shoal waters?
They seem to love the shoulder, in general, they seem to like the shallower water, the protected water. Behind the islands, with those northeast trade winds, the big mountains will protect these waters, give it a calm lee. And certainly the mothers and calves definitely love this, nice shoal water, protected, it's calm. If you've seen a small humpback whale, they're like 12 feet, 10, 12 feet long. They're kind of uncoordinated. Sometimes they need a little assistance on that first breath. I've seen a lot of them when they're first trying that breath. They come up and they misjudge the surface. They come up and they blow, she come up, right? And they tuck in too early and a little butt comes up. And they go, oops, and they kind of bring them, blow up and take a breath. Don't do that for exercise. And then they start getting good at it. Well, I think it's a lot easier to practice and get that down in Hawaii versus maybe up here at high latitudes, and you get some squalls coming through like we had this morning. It may not be so conducive for a little guy. Survivorship may go down. So it's just one reason, one of many, that the mother might go down and make a 2,000-mile migration. Why spend that energy? Brings up another whole question, doesn't it? But why spend the energy? 2,000 miles, straight line distance. That's a lot of cost, but there's a lot of benefits too. A lot of benefits. There's a lot of this. It's pretty good. It's been great questions. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
Thank you to our speakers. And thank you to all of you for coming out and joining us this evening. I'll just do a quick plug that our next lecture series event will be our Lunch and Learn with Sophia, June 22nd. It should be a Saturday. If it's not a Saturday, it's whatever that Saturday is.
And what's Sophia talking on again?
Media literacy.
Media literacy.
And of course, being a Lunch and Learn event, that's a brown bag lunch event, so you can bring your lunches and have some food while you listen to Sophia talk about media literacy. But hopefully we'll see you there. Otherwise, have a good night, and thank you again for joining us.